Good day, Tragic here, and welcome to something a little bit new. This is Through the Ages, a new story of civilization, and this is the current Android app that's just come out. I'm running this in an application called BlueStacks, which is a free Android emulator that you can get off the internet to run it on PC. But you can run this on your pads or whatever. Now, this is just an introduction video. I'll be releasing at the same time as an actual first turn video, but basically I'm just going to go through what Through the Ages is and how Through the Ages plays. If you understand how the tutorial, you don't need a tutorial in the application or in the game itself, then just jump to the next video. But for those of you who don't know, Through the Ages is another Vlad Chvátil. I don't know how to pronounce your name, mate. You're a legend though, because he makes some of the best games at the moment. I mean, he could be the greatest board game designer living at this current time. You know, I mean, there's a few contenders, but he's definitely in the, the top 5 list without a doubt. One of the things that makes him so great is his variety. I mean, you have people like Jeroen Rosenberg, or who, the guy who made Agricola and all that kind of stuff, but his games are all very similar. But Vlad, his games are just, every single game is just unrelated. I mean, he's making this, then he's got like real-time games, Space Alert, and he's got, that crazy deck builder Mage Knight, which is like one of the best games ever as well. And then he's got like amazing party games like Codenames and awesome strategy, like abstract games like Tashkala. I mean, he makes fantastic games, and this game is arguably one of the greatest games of the modern era. I mean, it could be considered one of the best board games of the last 20 years without a doubt. I mean, it is fantastic. I mean, technically it's a card game, but it's just amazing, this game. You know how sometimes you play a board game and the game design just speaks to you, like, wow, you just play the whole thing just marveling at how well it's designed? Well, that is this kind of game. Now, this is edition 2. Well, I call it edition 2. I think there was actually 3 editions of the first version of Through the Ages. I actually have 2 of them. Well, I've got 3 of them, including this one. But I find New Story of Civilization so clunky. And the other editions, they had some, I think there was actually tweaks in them, but this is just basically a new game, which is why they got the new. You see, this game, because it's so well designed and it's just so fun, it's built up a very large competitive scene where people play each other and all this kind of stuff, just like many of the top games have actual leagues and all that. And what's cool about Through the Ages is that they have a website called Board Games Online. Now, Board Games Online is like Board Game Arena or Utica or Box of Games or whatever, that French one. And so you can play Through the Ages on it for free, and it's fantastic. But the thing about that one is that it was sort of official in a way. And they only had Through the Ages. It's the only game on there. Well, it was last time I checked, about a year ago. But when they made this game, they took literally years and thousands of games and all the data from that website to look at Through the Ages and see which cards are getting used the most in which winning moves. How long are the games taking? How many times are people restarting their move? They just took all this data and made one of the best games even better. I mean, they did some radical changes that were a little bit hard to swallow at first. They've changed how corruption works, and they've changed the way the tactics works, but, I mean, it is such a good game, and it's just better now. I actually prefer the new one, and I think it's still one of the best games ever. So that's enough gushing. Let's get into this. So we're playing in the Android app, so I'm just going to go local game. I'm going to do challenges, and I thought maybe the challenge section might be a fun progression series that I could play over time, peppered in with the occasional live match. I don't know if I'll be able to do live matches very well because I haven't tried doing a live match through Android, through BlueStacks. So I'm just going to do start with the 2-player classic on easy, the first challenge, and I'm just going to do a quick overview of how Through the Ages works for those people that do not know. Now, what we're looking at here is a representation of the physical board game's player area. Okay, so all these things, you've got warriors, you've got agriculture, you've got mining, you've got labs, and you've got temples. Now, if I click on here, you can actually see the physical cards that you get in the games. Now, you can play the game sort of like this, but once you get used to this sort of visual representation, it's quite easy. So the way it works is in this game is that you have your civilization, which is what we're looking at, and it produces culture, which is this sort of harp at the top. Culture is the VPs. That's how you win the game. It doesn't matter how much technology you have or how much resources or how big your army is. If you're not got the most culture, you lose the game. It's very easy to focus on the wrong thing because there's so much you've got to keep in balance in this. This little light bulb is your current technology level or technology research points, right? So you can see this one is +1, okay? So next turn, we're going to have 1 point. The turn after that, 2 points, and so on. And various technologies that you have to invent will cost points. So if I want to invent, coal mining, I might need to spend 8 technology points or whatever. And, that's where it comes from, this value here. And the plus is the increase per turn. And that's the same for the other one. So this one's food and this one is resources. Now, one of the truly brilliant ideas in this board game is that instead of having 500 different types of resources, we have a single token, in this case, these little blue cubes, that stand for resources. So this token here is any resource it requires. It doesn't turn into its own resource type until it's placed upon the card. So if I look at the current starting technologies, you see I have agriculture, I have bronze, I have philosophy and religion, which is, food, mining, labs, and temples. Now you can see these little yellow dots on them, right? These are our workers. That means that currently we have 1 worker in philosophy, 1 philosophy building maybe is a way to look at it, right? And we have 2 mines and we have 2 agriculture. Now at the very bottom of the technology card, it shows you what that produces. So I have 2 workers on agriculture, which means I produce 2 food because each worker produces 1 food. Same with bronze. I'm producing 2 resources per turn, and I'm producing 1 technology point per turn, and I'm not producing any happiness or any VPs per turn. And you can see this at this bar at the top. So it's 0 food +2, 0 +2, 0 +1, 0 +0. Now, anytime at the end of the game during production, you move tokens from the blue line up onto your card. And as soon as at the moment, I'm placing 2 tokens on bronze and 2 tokens on agriculture. And as soon as they're placed upon those cards, they cease being generic and are now those types of resources. And it's very, very, so when you start producing lots and lots of resources, you can start to see how amazing this idea is. It's just, it's brilliant. And over here, you can see our work account. These are our civilization, and all these sort of guys in this to the left here, they're guys that we haven't produced yet, okay? And inside this little box here, we have unassigned workers, and this food icon here is how much it costs to move a worker from our potential pool into our unassigned worker slots. So if I just load up that screen to get a better look at it, because it's sort of, they're trying to condense all the information on the card, on the player boards in real life into this tiny screen. So basically, as you produce workers, they move into the ready to be assigned box. And every time you clear, see how there's a kind of gray box here, and there's a big gray box here where those resources are. every time you clear one of those boxes, that box activates. So I can produce another worker and nothing will change. If I produce 2 workers, now the cost of producing workers is going to cost 3. But in addition, to feed the workers who are in my civilization, I'm going to lose 1 food of every production. So at the moment, I'm producing 2 food. If I produce another 2 workers, I'm going to be producing 2 food, but I'm only going to be keeping 1. Same with, your corruption. As you take more and more tokens off this track, you start getting larger and larger corruption penalties, which basically means if I end my turn and this box is empty, right, then after production I will lose 2 resources, 4 resources, 6 resources. So you need to be very efficient with your turns, because you need to keep as many resources off your cards and in your resource track as possible to stop corruption from occurring. Now at the bottom, you'll see that you have happy faces, because in addition to revealing how much food, like say if I reveal this entire cube here, it's -2 food and it's 4 to build. But because I've revealed this one as well, I will also need 2 smiley faces. Now, smiley faces are sort of the how content your workers are. And various objects are going to produce smiley faces. For example, I have no one assigned to a religion at the moment, and if I do, I'll be gaining 1 VP a turn plus 1 smiley face. That means that I can empty this area and I'll have a smiley face there, which means I'll get no penalty. If I start pulling out of this area and there's no smiley face there, you get discontent, okay? If there's 2 levels of no smiley faces, you actually face a possible revolution. Now, discontent workers are not as bad as you might think, but they can be targeted by various card effects. So that's basically how this production board works. You want to keep as many resources on the corruption line as possible to stop corruption. Okay, so you want to keep filling it up at every turn, spend as many resources as possible so you don't get any corruption. And these resources can be anything. Whatever cards they come from, they end up on this track and come from this track. And with your food, you've got your food consumption at the top, you've got the cost to increase at the top, and then you have your possible people to create, and then you have your happy faces, and you've got to keep them all in balance. And you'll see that happen as we start playing. Now, you'll also note that all the technology cards have this sort of value with a little rock in the corner here. This is how many resources it costs to construct this building. So if I want to move one of my workers from my available worker pool into a building, like say I wanted to build another mine, which I kind of like doing, I like getting 3 or 4 mines pretty early, then by dragging that up or clicking on that and going build, I can't actually build anything in the first turn, but it will take 2 resources away from me and add a new worker here, which means at the end of the production phase, I'm now going to be producing 3 instead of 2. Okay? So if I wanted to create a temple, like put a priest to work at my temple here, it would cost me 3 resources to move a guy from my active ready worker pool, not from this big large pool here, because you need to spend food to move from here into the active pool. Then you need to spend resources to move from the active pool to here. Now there's all sorts of other stuff as well. We also have our army, and there's all different types of armies. It goes all the way up to like Air Force planes and tanks and stuff like this, because it goes through the history of civilization. Same deal. Okay, every worker produces what's on the bottom, and this is common for all cards. So this guy is producing 1 combat or 1 defense, or however you want to imagine it. I just say combat. So he's producing 1 combat for every worker, and it costs 2 resources to build a warrior. And that's pretty much the main thing. Over here we have our Well, I'll talk about that in a sec. First, let's have a quick look at the offer up the top. Now, this is the crux of the game, and where it's really awesome, basically. It's based on a card offer. Now, in a 2-player game, the card offer moves quite slowly. But in a 4-player game, it moves at lightning speed. Because not only are people taking cards from the offer constantly, at the end of every turn, not every round, every single turn, whatever's in these first 3 slots will be destroyed. So they've got little red X's. So I could take anything I want, but if I don't take these ones, they will be lost forever. And what that means is, in a 4-player game especially, because there's so many cards being taken from the offer and there's so many cards being destroyed, the game can move very, very fast. So you can't be afraid to buy really expensive cards. And you'll note that the cards are split into 3 sections. See these little white dots? So you've got 1-cost cards, 2-cost cards, and 3-cost cards. So the more you spend, the more likely you are to get the exact card you want. And you can't be stingy with this. You know, it's a very... especially beginners, they're like, oh, I'll wait for that card to get cheaper, but no, it's gone and you never see it again. And then you're like, man, I didn't get to upgrade my thing for so long. Now, there's a whole bunch of different types of cards. There's basically, these yellow ones are events. So you can take any event into your hand. It does whatever it says on it, but you can't play it until the turn after you take it. Then you have these things, which are wonders. You know, this is the Library of Alexandretta. And it's quite complicated to build. You can see it, you've got to build it in stages: 1 resource, 4 resources, and 1 resource. But at the bottom, you get sort of civilization-wide bonuses that last the entire game. In this case, you get a culture point, and you get a technology point every turn. And the good thing about wonders is that they do not require workers. Okay? Now, you don't want to go too crazy with your wonders. Like, it's very tempting to build just tons of wonders, but they're expensive and they really slow down the rest of the production of your civilization. But they are also extremely powerful. For example, this one here, the Colossus, this gives us +2 combat. And it's only 3 to build. So if you're like, I'm not a particularly aggressive player, but if you're an aggressive player, this is a good one to take because it gets you some early antiquity level combat going. Now, that other little symbol, which is like a boat, I'll talk about when we get into the next age, like age 1. I think it's called the Age of Bronze or something, because that stands for colonization points. See, another card that'll come out during the political phase is new lands. You know, like America is a land or whatever, and these lands will have resources on them and all sorts of things, and you vie for control by sending armies out there. And this Colossus will give me 1 point in addition to whatever my armies are worth. So it's a very good early card. Hanging Gardens, look at this one. I get culture points and 2 happiness. That could solve your happiness problems for most of the game. Now, these things sort of become harder and harder to pick because every time you pick one, you have to spend an extra point per wonder you already have. So if I already had a wonder and I took Library of Alexandretta, even though it's only 1 point, it'll actually cost 2. And now, oh yeah, and also, now we haven't got any technology or war cards. I'll talk about them when we go through, but technology cards are basically exactly like these. There are new types of technology cards, like urban buildings and stuff like that, but a lot of the cards you find are going to be upgradable versions of what we already have. And I'll talk about it when it happens, but basically, see this little symbol here, looks like a pick and a hammer. If I get like a coal mine or a bronze mine or an oil refinery, all these kind of things are different types of resource collection. And they, instead of building new ones, you can upgrade existing ones. And I'll talk about that in a sec. But apart from that, they look exactly the same. The big difference though is in the top left that these ones don't have because they're starting technologies. They have a technology cost, like say 4 light bulbs, and you have to spend those light bulbs to invent that technology. Also, you have leaders. Now, leaders are basically, well, they're like powers for your civilization, give your civilization some direction. Like you might get Gandhi, or Napoleon was like crazy powerful. I mean, he's still pretty powerful, but he's not like ridiculously bonkers like he used to be. And it changes the way you play. One of my favorite early leaders is this guy here because you get extra actions with him. But it really depends. Homer's really good if you don't want to go too heavy on your, wonder creation, because he basically gives you free happiness. But my point is, there's all these different cards. They all do different things, and it's very easy to get used to because the iconographies are great. They have costs, and it all comes off here. Now, finally, let's have a look at our current government, which is a depositism. And you'll see that there's 2 values on it. Well, there's a bunch of values on it. This one has 4 actions, 2 red actions, and 2 urban buildings. That's the little thing in the corner here. So that means is I can only ever have 2 urban buildings. So I've already got urban buildings are these grayish ones, right? So I've already got 1 building. So if I build a religion or if I build a second philosophy, I can't build any more urban buildings until I somehow upgrade my urban building count, either through technology cards or better yet, a better type of government. Now, one of the most common things you'd be doing is spending civil actions, which are the white tokens. Okay, so we start with 4, and you can make 4 actions. Once you spend all your actions, that's the end of your turn, basically. You also have the red. In this case, we have 2. And those are simply military actions. These cannot be used for doing any kind of civil action, but you can use them for building and upgrading and playing various military cards. So as new things come out, like theocracy, monarchy, or whatever, you'll get different numbers of actions. You can get like 7 actions and 4 military actions or whatever. Plus you'll produce actual technology and wonders that can give you more actions. But these actions are basically how many cards you can hold. Like you can hold, if I have depositism, I've got 4 actions to do. I can hold 4 cards in my hand, and I can hold 2 political cards in my hand. And that's kind of an overview of the game with basically enough to sort of get started. Now, this is a 2-player game, which means that because I mainly play 3 and 4-player game, I'm not used to the speed of the offer. So it might take me a while to figure out exactly, like I really like this guy here in my antiquity age because he gives me extra actions because I'm not very aggressive. But I can't take him because when you start the game, in order of who begins, because you get advantage by being able to pick first, the first player gets 1 action, second player 2 actions, and so forth at the beginning. So I've only got 1 action, so I can take anything from the first row, and that is that. Now, I could take something like the library, but I'm actually going to take probably an urban growth. But before I do that, I'm just going to end this video, and then I'm going to go straight into the actual gameplay in the next one. So, I'll see you guys next time.